What makes this subject different from many others, and therefore warrants extra caution, is that when it comes to talking about K-12 education, and early learning specifically, we are dealing with the point where the state and the family actually intersect. And that becomes a very, very tricky subject and a tricky area to try to operate in, especially when we're starting to talk about the youngest members and usually the most vulnerable members of a family. So even though the state does enter this relationship in differing arenas, there are varying beliefs surrounding the role of the state in what are deemed to be actually family matters. So overall, I think that the majority sentiment is that the state should not be interjecting itself unnecessarily. It shouldn't be handing out any sort of mandate, and it shouldn't be telling parents how to raise their kids. And you know what, nor would we really want them to. But I haven't spoken to a legislator yet who does not believe in the statistics and the information that is being presented. And I haven't met one yet who's really completely against the idea of early education overall. What we're actually seeing in the legislature are these signs that say proceed with caution, because you're entering into a very difficult arena. And oh, by the way, since we are talking about it, which is kind of what our point was, here are some other things that we want you to consider. So here are some of the things that the legislators have kind of brought up and that we were dealing with. So in our initial proposals of the last 2 years, having one choice or option for an early childhood learning was actually being construed as having no choice, which was actually being viewed as being inconsistent with Idaho's very strong attitude towards catering education to fit the community, the family, the parents, and the children. And as many of you know, Idaho is extremely supportive of school choice in regards to public, private, charter, and homeschool venues. So Idaho is also very supportive of the type of education, such as whether in-person participation or virtual participation. And these options were not previously addressed in our legislation either. Other concerns that were voiced were, there was an expression of fear that said somehow if we went ahead and addressed early childhood learning now, that would steer us away from the governor's task force recommendations. And I can tell you that many members of the legislature are heavily invested in those task force recommendations, and many stakeholders are certainly anticipating those. But it's never been our intention to steer anything away. Early childhood learning is certainly meant to complement and actually help focus the K through 3 reading initiative. So I think we're going to find some common ground there. Another concern voiced was that the initiation of a pilot program, and the pilot program was was actually the aim of the original legislation. They were afraid that would eventually lead to early childhood education becoming a permanent addition and mandate to the K-12 curriculum, and then therefore basically being overtaken by the state completely in a realm that a lot of people feel is still a family matter. So that is a very sensitive subject when we start talking and intersecting there. It was actually a very big concern for a lot of people, legislators, who didn't think it's the state's responsibility or their business to be involved to such an extent in the early formative years of education.
Idaho is just one of 6 states that does not invest any state dollars in early childhood programs. This number has dramatically declined from 12 states in just a few short years, 2 to be exact. And I am confident that that number will continue to get smaller in the near future, leaving Idaho with the potential of being last to invest in early childhood education. Today we know that 50% of our children are not prepared to enter kindergarten. And for all intents and purposes, that means that half of our kids are not able to identify 10 letters in the alphabet. We have some school districts right here in Idaho that close to 80% of the children are not prepared to enter kindergarten. These numbers are based on the Kindergarten Idaho Reading Indicator, or otherwise known as the IRI. But this is just one measurement of school readiness. I want to be clear about that. This does not take into account a child's social-emotional development. A child's social and emotional well-being is just as, if not more important, than academic readiness. The foundations of social competence that are developed in the first 5 years are linked to emotional well-being and affect a child's ability later in life to functionally adapt in school and to form successful relationships throughout life. Research tells us that children that have the opportunities to engage in high-quality early learning programs are more likely to enter school ready to learn, more likely to graduate from high school, more likely to enter and graduate college, and be career ready. Research also tells us that children that do not have these opportunities to engage in high-quality early learning are more likely to drop out of school and engage in criminal activity, costing taxpayers millions of dollars in the long run. That is one reason that we often hear law enforcement advocating for high-quality early learning. They know and they can see firsthand what happens when we don't.
You have to invest in your infrastructure, and we understand that when we talk about roads and bridges, but for some reason we can't seem to make the jump to understand that the infrastructure is also in your children as well.
It's about priorities. It's about priorities.
The state can empower parents, and how they can empower them is by aiding them in being able to have the options available to them in the first place. I believe that most parents would love to have their children go to preschool. I have no doubt about it. They just don't have those options, and they don't understand the process. They don't have the money, and it's not that they don't want to. So in order for the state to empower the parents, it's one thing to just say, yep, it's all yours and you pick, but they have to have those options available, and I think that that's where the state can step up and help with that.
Are there steps the state can do that aren't big, costly steps?
Well, I mean, I think everything costs money, right? I think that we need to look at the programs that we have. We've got a fantastic home visiting program here in Idaho, but unfortunately we don't have the capacity to serve all the families that are needed. So I think that money plays into to a variety of roles. I think that we need to encourage our parents to read to their children. I mean, that's one of the very easy first steps that we can do, that we as a society, some parents don't know that simply reading to their children can make a tremendous impact on that child's ability to learn to read when they enter school.